Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Understanding Our Founders' Constitution. I'm your host, Frank Kushar, and I hope you've had a wonderful weekend. And I want to, before we get into our discussion tonight, remind everybody again, if you happen to live in the Dallas-Fort Worth greater area, of the upcoming discussion, or debate, if you will, that's going to be held on this Thursday in the meeting of the Arlington Tea Party. There's going to be a discussion on the Article 5 Convention of the States for the purpose of proposing amendments that we have been discussing over the last, I guess 3, maybe almost 4 months here in this program. And this is going to be a discussion the 12th of June, starting at 7 o'clock. And there's going to be 2 of us on each side of this issue with a moderator, so to speak, presenting the mechanics of how an Article 5 convention would work, and representing a neutral position will be Dwayne Stovall, former candidate for the United States Senate in the recent senatorial primary here in the Republican Party in Texas. Also, those presenting the arguments in favor of a Article 5 convention will be Tom Dowdy and Tom McCorkle, who are both with the Convention of the States project of the Texas chapter. And I got a chance to visit just briefly with, I believe it was Tom Dowdy, at the at the Republican State Convention meeting yesterday here in the city of Fort Worth. Presenting the opposing arguments, in addition to myself, I will be joined by Michael Connolly, who is a noted author, a constitutional attorney, and the executive director of the United States Justice Foundation. I spoke with Michael over the weekend, and he has been busy going about the country helping veterans who have been, shall I say, denied care or not treated properly by the VA administration. So he is very much into both helping our veterans and also involved in constitutional matters. He has written a book on the Constitution. He also has a radio program on constitutional matters. So I am looking forward to teaming up with him to discuss this very important subject. So I hope if you live in the area and you have an interest in whether or not the Article 5 Convention of the States is both a proper and wise thing to do, that you'll join us at the Pantego Lions Club, also the other community center, located at 3535 Marathon Street in Pantego, Texas. That's here sort of surrounded by Arlington. And there will be a meet and greet at 6:30 with the program beginning sharply at 7 o'clock. So I hope you will join us for that. I now want to turn our attention to some of the events that have gone on lately here with our illustrious president. We have yet another scandal. And we might say, well, is this really a scandal or not? And I think it does. And that is the recent release of 5 top Al-Qaeda terrorists from Guantanamo Bay in exchange for an Army sergeant who went missing 5 years ago. We have heard the President explain that this was a prisoner swap, as happens oftentimes in conflicts of war, where prisoners of war are exchanged, and that the situation was dire and such that it required his immediate action, and therefore he had to arrange the swap in secret without anybody else outside of his inner circle being aware of it. And we now have many finally saying this man, this president, needs to be impeached. And so that is going to be the topic of our discussion tonight. Does President Obama need to be impeached? Has he risen to that level? Well, I have in occasions past argued that he already has reached that threshold. But there are finally those who have said he had not. They are finally coming around to the position that, yes, indeed, he has reached an impeachable offense with this. And I want to interject what really is President Obama's attitude towards all this that belies his actions. The idea of him being impeached is a violation. He must have violated his position as president. And if we turn to our Constitution, it says that the President, in Article 2, Section 4, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office or impeachment for conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. And the emphasis being placed upon his conduct now is that of treason. And how is treason defined in our Constitution? For that, we go to Article 3, Section 3. Treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them. Well, President Obama has not levied actual physical war. Now, he's levied economic war and oppressive war in terms of regulations and so forth, but not the kind of war that the Constitution is talking about. Or, it continues, in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. The question is now before us, has President Obama met that definition of treason? All I think we need do is to look at the reaction of the Taliban when these 5 men were released in their custody and they were reunited. And the joy that they had, shouts of how Allah is great, and how Allah has triumphed over the United States, and that they will now be able to crush the United States. And one of these 5 men has even said he intends to go back to Afghanistan, despite the conditions that we were told were negotiated about their release, that he intends to go back to Afghanistan to kill more Americans. Now I ask you, in light of that response on the part of these members of the Taliban and this one particular individual saying he's going to go back to killing Americans, has President Obama met the definition of treason in that he has adhered to our enemies and has given them aid and comfort? Would not giving them occasion for a joyous celebration be giving them comfort? Is that not adhering to our enemies? Because those 5 men, those were not men that he determined to release. They were the ones that the Taliban said, if you want your sergeant back, these are the 5 that we want to have back. They dictated the terms of this prisoner swap, so-called. And what was it for? It was for a gentleman who abandoned his post, by all accounts, and there seems to be pretty strong evidence that he collaborated with the Taliban, was seeking them out, and even joined in with them and gave them information that led to the injury and death of some of his fellow soldiers. And indeed, perhaps he should be tried for treason as well. A condition and a violation, according to military code of conduct, that would be punishable by death. If you don't think we've not done this before, I would urge you to go back and read about what General Washington did to some of his soldiers during our War of Independence. If they even acted in subordination in an attempt to overthrow his authority, he had them shot. There was an attempt to have a mutiny against him in his ranks, and he had some of those who were joining in the leadership of that mutiny, he had them execute the leaders of that mutiny. He didn't mess around with this type of stuff. And yet today we tolerate it. Today our president gloats over what he has done in the Rose Garden. What is treason in the minds of people? The dictionary says it is the betrayal of a trust or confidence, a breach of faith, treachery. And certainly Barack Obama has betrayed the trust put in him by those who voted for him, the confidence that anybody might have had in him. He has acted treacherously against all of us, whether we voted for him or not. Now, President Obama was asked why he did this and why he did not obey the law. You see, President Obama had signed into law a bill passed by both the House and the Senate with bipartisan support that stated that before any prisoners could be released from the prison at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, he had to give a 30-day notice to Congress. And that would have been primarily to 8 specific leaders in Congress. And so he was asked in an interview during after the D-Day celebrations in Normandy, France, why did he not do this? He was asked by Brett Baer, what was the reason for not informing Congress? not by Brett Baer, I forget the reporter's name. It was an NBC reporter. And here was his answer, quote, "It was a unanimous decision among my principals in my government and a view shared by my members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff." Did you notice the use of the pronouns in that sentence? A unanimous decision among my principals in my government and a view shared by my members. He started to say my Joint Chiefs of Staff. Well, it may be his principles, it may be his cabinet, but it is not his government. It may be his administration, but it is our government. It is a government of the people, by the people, and supposedly for the people, according to Abraham Lincoln. You see the attitude that slipped out of here in that simple pronoun. He considers himself above acting the way a president is expected to act. He is above the law because it is, after all, his government. When the president takes the oath of office, according to the Constitution, in Article 2, Section 1, it says, "Before he enter on the execution of office, he shall take the following oath or affirmation. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the office of the President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States." Execute the office of the President. What does that entail? That entails upholding the law, seeing that the laws are executed. Did he obey the law in this case? No, he did not. He acted on his own because he had a political purpose for doing so. Because he knew that had he approached Congress the way the law required him to do, he would be told by them no. News of it would leak out, and he would reap such a backlash amongst the people that he would not be able to have made the prisoner swap. Well, this bill that he signed, which requires him to notify Congress, we now know he did it by also signing a statement to it called a signing statement. And what a signing statement is when a president signs a law that he doesn't really agree with or doesn't like, he will add what's called a signing statement to it, which basically says, sure, I'll sign this bill, but I might not always abide by it. Where is that constitutional? And this act is not just something that Obama dreamed up, but is also something that was done by President George Bush, his predecessor, President Clinton. And so it's not just a President Obama invention. And I don't care who the president is. I don't care what party the president is. You cannot sign a law and add some little King's X statement to it that says, okay, I'll sign this into law, but I might not enforce it. I might not abide by it because I don't like it. If you don't like the law, Mr. President, no matter who you are or what party you are, there's something you can do about it. It's called a veto. That is what the Congress is expecting from you. Either you will sign the bill and then, to the best of your ability, enforce it because that's the oath you took, or if you don't like the bill, you will veto it, send it back to them with your objections, and then they will have to override your veto with a 2/3 vote in each house. That is what the Constitution gives you the power and the obligation to do. You, as the chief executive officer, elected by the people through the Electoral College and their electors, expect you to do. That you are to defend us against laws that are not in the best interest of us by vetoing them. That is the check and balance our founders put into place, in which you so cavalierly and arrogantly dismissed by adding an unconstitutional signing statement, because after all, it is your government. And it was your principles that unanimously told you this is what should be done. And so, do we have grounds upon which to impeach this president, to remove him from office? You bet we do. And hopefully Congress will take up that challenge and do what they have taken an oath to do, and that is to fulfill their obligations under the Constitution to remove one who has become a law unto himself. So with that, I wish you a good evening, and we'll see you back here next week. Good night.